Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest is Tom Topping, the Senior Director of Strategic Programs for FireEye. Tom, we spent the first half of the show talking about what is cyber threat intelligence. You talked about accuracy. You talked about value. You talked about timeliness. Let's talk about how to set up a program. Okay, so we're going to get all this data, all this information. We're going to add analytics, but really, how do I use it? So maybe if you're going to implement, and I think everybody is implementing some sort of cyber threat intelligence program, what are some of the steps? How do you go about doing that?
The right approach is really to start from the top and define what the organizational goals are for cyber threat intelligence. And from that, you will determine a list of the stakeholders in the organization that are relevant to cyber threat intelligence. And for many organizations, it's from the secretary or board of directors all the way down to the SOC and the CERT and the incident response teams. For other organizations, sometimes they just use cyber threat intelligence more tactically. But once you have your stakeholders identified, then you've got to engage those stakeholders and determine what they want to achieve, how they want to, what they want to come out of it, and really what you're after is to derive their requirements. And then once you pull all of that together and you analyze it against the threat and what you're trying to protect, then you can begin to take the steps to see what sources you have, what sources you need, which of those sources are machine readable and easy to integrate and automate, and where people need to get plugged in to take action. But having a cyber threat intelligence program span from the executive level down to the operational level really facilitates a dialogue within the organization from the tactical cyber stuff up to the risk level discussions.
You said an interesting point. Which sources are machine readable, easy to automate, and which ones aren't? I would hope by now that almost everything is machine readable and easy to automate. I mean, I brought up sticks and taxis on the front end of our discussion. I know DHS is now implementing version 2. Where are we with this whole discussion of not just automation, but machine readable, easy to understand?
Sure. My guess is that anyone in the listening audience that's been in cyber for more than 5 years has a term in mind they're thinking right now, and that's the spreadsheet of doom. And that's been the mechanism for so long by which cyber data has been shared, right? Let's collect those IP addresses and domains and maybe the hashes that we want to block or tell somebody to block, and we'll send it over in a spreadsheet. There are several efforts underway in industry to define the standards by which the data is structured, sticks, and the protocols by which they're exchanged. Taxi is an example. But it just depends on what tools the organization's using, what analytics they have. But there are RESTful APIs. There are all kinds of ways for the data to be accessed and then utilized. And it comes down to the very specific needs of an organization.
I would hope that spreadsheet of doom still doesn't exist. Please tell me you haven't seen that in a while.
Well, I don't know. All of your listeners can send you an email about whether they get a spreadsheet of doom, but my guess is that there's a lot of spreadsheets of doom still out there.
Oh, no. Not a good sign if it's still out there. I mean, especially since, as you brought up APIs, you would think that it's how hard would it be to write an API to at least make this automation happen, which actually is a great segue down to the path of automation. I mean, that's in many ways because of the volume and the velocity of data, of information, of the analytics results, you really do need that automation to implement the changes because a human just couldn't keep up.
Yep, you really do. And there are several things that are happening to drive automation within a security operations center. You see a lot of that in products that facilitate or automate IT operations, and now similar kind of orchestration products that are automating security operations. You can also find a huge amount of automation within specific vendor product suites, because those vendors have had the luxury of time and engineering effort to fully integrate what they have. So it ends up being a combination of all that. And there's still, almost every organization still has some wizard in the back room that is automating by hand themselves, and they still do it. And when the engineer or the sergeant leaves, all of a sudden the scripts are breaking. But folks have been trying to automate for quite a while.
But without this automation, this success around cyber threat intelligence, using it to make decisions, it's not going to happen well. I mean, this has to be the if you will, the golden cup in many ways.
I think you're right, but it isn't just that, because if you look at a piece of finished cyber intelligence, many of your listeners will remember back to 2013 when Mandiant released the APT-1 report about the Chinese. This was a PDF, but it was a cyber intelligence report that identified the actor, identified the tools, identified things you could look for on your network. And it was a PDF, but it was a PDF that enabled leadership to have a discussion around risk. So it isn't just automation, but automation is critical, even necessary, to gain full advantage of utilizing cyber threat intelligence.
You brought this up a little bit earlier as well, this idea of using automation and orchestration to also move employees away from, we'll use what the Trump administration is calling low-value work to high-value work, if you will. I think that's actually a good way to describe what's happening. And a lot of that is the person in the data center watching the blinking lights, right? Can you automate some of those blinking lights now? Is that the other piece to this, is ensuring, because automation is going to help your workforce add more value to managing risk?
Yes, and another customer use case is we have two customers that are using orchestration tools internally, and part of what they've automated is information sharing. So they're detecting stuff on each side. They're using the orchestration to pass those specific indicators back and forth. They're very high fidelity indicators that are getting plugged straight into detection and blocking rules, and the efficacy on each side is gone up. So it's the perfect story. And what we need to do is we need to see a lot of that same kind of thing happening all over the place.
Aside from the people side, but this automation orchestration piece, what's happening from a government perspective? Is the Homeland Security Department, through AIS, through other things, what's happening with that sharing piece? Because is DHS sending FireEye the spreadsheet of doom? Please tell me they're not.
No, FireEye, like many organizations, is participating with DHS in information sharing. DHS has also acquired very comprehensive cyber threat intelligence that is made available to the civilian departments. So those organizations that aren't sure what they have access to should get a hold of DHS and see what's there and learn how to use it, because there's some very good stuff available.
And you see that this is happening two ways, or is it one way? I mean, I said in my intro, it feels like there's a lot of one-way information sharing, government to industry, because industry is worried about liability and stuff sharing back. When we were talking, before we got started here, you said, well, there's funny because the industry sees it the other way. The government's worried about unclassifying data and sharing their information. So where are we at, I guess, with threat intelligence information sharing, generally speaking?
I think that as opposed to commenting about around who can share what, or what do they have and what aren't they sharing, that none of those is productive. Let's figure out what is being shared and what somebody might be willing to share, and consider that within the realm of what's possible, and then figure out how to leverage that. And I think that from an agency, a department, from an enterprise perspective, doing an analysis of what's at hand, what's available, and is it accurate, is it timely, is it relevant, is it actionable? And if the answer to those four is yes, there's some serious value to be had there. And I think that that's very much worth looking into.
I know you can't speak for all of industry, but from FireEye's perspective to a certain extent, are there any concerns that you guys still have around sharing with the government when it comes to threat intelligence? Is there anything that stands out there that said, well, if they could only address this issue, or if Congress can address that issue, that would make things even better? Anything that comes to mind?
No. We, through our customers, most of our federal customers consume threat intelligence that flows downstream from FireEye. 85% of our customers globally share with us, and we have a handful of federal organizations that share with us, and that gives them a huge value. So think about this. An organization's sensor equipment detects something, that gets shared with FireEye, and FireEye returns attribution to the organization. And now they haven't lifted a finger, and they know specifically who's attacking them. And then through cyber threat intelligence, if they can access that and then understand what are the other indicators that might indicate that threat actor is in my environment, we can take those indicators, hand them to the hunt team, and now the hunt team is looking for something that's relevant. And the organization has gone from one indicator to attribution, and maybe not a specific threat actor, but to a tool set. Hey, what are the other indicators for that tool set? And now you've enabled the SOC to focus, you've enabled the hunt team to focus, and maybe you've enabled the IR team to focus. And all of that focus is efficiency and results. So again, you're getting much better cyber results for dollar spent.
You bring up a great piece of information, almost a great segue when you talk about the threat sharing piece. There's the commercial cyber threat intelligence. It seems like the government's using more of it. As you said, FireEye is sharing with 85% of your customers or something to that effect. Maybe talk about the role that the commercial threat intelligence is having both in the private sector but also in the government public sector.
I think that the environment, the market, federal agencies, enterprises are beginning to see the value of comprehensive cyber threat intelligence. Part of the problem, Jason, is that there's a lot of noise out there. I mean, every vendor with a widget is pushing some kind of information down to their product, and they're calling it cyber threat intelligence. So enterprises really need to take a look at what their sources are, and whether those sources enable them to simplify their problem, to focus on who their threat actors are, and pivot from indicators to simplify the mission of the SOC. And once agencies and organizations do that inventory of what's available to them, they can find ways to shrink their problem and save money and be more effective.
And I think that's a huge piece of this discussion. It's not just, hey, there's data out there, hey, there's information out there, hey, there's analytical tools you can run those data information through, but what's the end result? Be more effective. And I'll tell you, Tom, this has been a very great conversation, but we're just about out of time. So that's a good way to talk about what's the takeaways. No agency is starting at 0 with cyber threat intelligence. No agency, even the Defense Department's at 100. How do agencies move the needle to get closer to 100? What are some of the things, based on our conversation, that they need to keep in mind as they continue to develop their cyber threat intelligence efforts?
A couple things I'd offer as a takeaway. One is do a review, do an internal review, and see what you're using, what you have access to, and do you think you're getting the results you'd like to out of it, right? Is it helping you shrink the problem? Is it helping you focus on those threat actors that are most likely to attack you? And as you go through that review and analyze those assets you have, those sources you have, and whether you're getting those results, if you need help, ask for it. There are many in the industry who can help turn that cyber threat intelligence into very positive outcomes.
Tom, this has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate your time today. Unfortunately, though, we're out of time. So let me thank my guest, Tom Topping, the Senior Director of Strategic Programs for FireEye. Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you for the invite.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carahsoft on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsradio.com and search innovation.